Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Good morning. It's a brand new day, a brand new week. It's the 13th of June 2016. This is Newsline. We're coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. I'm Sonali Vanigabaduge. Joining us this morning is Kusum Athukorala. She's a water activist and also the co-chair of the UNESCO Gender Panel for World Water Development Report. Good morning, Kusum.
Good morning, Sonali.
And thanks a lot for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. Kusum, before the show, we were discussing a lot about natural disasters, the disaster in Aranayaka, and years before, the disaster in Meriabadda.
Yes.
Are these natural disasters or are they man-made disasters?
They are natural disasters in the sense that most of these landslides followed what we call high-intensity rains, where you get an enormous amount of rain in a very short time. Like I believe we had something like 400 millimeters of rain in 22 hours in Aranayaka. But these natural phenomena is exacerbated by anthropogenic factors, in the sense that we ourselves are not prepared enough to meet these challenges.
Why are we not prepared enough? There are so many bodies, institutions, government agencies who are supposed to look into these matters. There's the Met Department, there's the National Building Research Organization, there's the Disaster Management Center, the DMC, the Disaster Management Ministry. But why do you say that we are not prepared enough?
Now, if you take the first line of responders in any disaster, and they are the ones who do a lot of work, they are the ones who do almost the best work, is the community. It is the community which is the first on the scene. But I am not so much about disaster reaction. I feel that the reaction is given too much of importance. But disaster risk reduction is what we should be talking about.
So there are all these fancy words: disaster risk reduction, disaster resilience, but these may be looked at as Western concepts, but are they really making any noise in Sri Lanka? I mean, in Sri Lanka, what we do is, as soon as there's a disaster, then we start reacting, then we start responding. But is this really what we need to be doing?
Well, you know that Sri Lanka has signed up to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015.
That's right.
And this very clearly identifies the importance of being prepared. Like the Boy Scouts, be prepared. And this is something that I feel that we need to do a little more, how shall I say, in a more systematic manner. The NBRO is there, it is doing a fantastic job. The DMC is there, but then in the end, if we look at Aranayaka, there are, quite apart from this, the heavy rainfall which triggered off the landslide, there has been a chapter of events which could have been recorded, which could have been addressed long before this happened. There was major land use planning changes. Now this is something which can be, I think, effectively dealt with at the regional level, at the community level, at the Grama Nildari level. Let's not forget that the Grama Nildari level has about 23 officers plus. Apart from that, there are project officers. There in Aranayaka, there would be a key development officers now who would also need to be involved, because these changes in land use planning and land use change, it comes very slowly. So but what we have not factored in as a community, as a nation, is that landslides are going to happen if we keep on changing what we do, especially in the upper catchments. I am very much concerned about the upper catchments, because as Sri Lanka Water Partnership, we have something called the Area Water Partnerships. One of it is the Maui Area Water Partnership. Aranayaka is the catchment. On both sides there is the catchment for Maui and for Kalani River. And now we are getting these heavy rains which people they have not factored it into their thinking, into their equation. I know that the DMC does very good training programs, but I also know from colleagues in the DMC that who turns up for these programs. Sometimes it is the only old lady left in the village, in the house. They are, it is as if, you have to send a representative, so you send in someone. But we have to factor this in so that every Grama Nildari office, every Grama Nildari district secretariat is going to work as an independent disaster cell, because they know best what is happening at ground level. They know that the tea estates, were not doing their soil conservation in the best possible way. They would see that because they are on the ground level.
So basically you're speaking about the importance of sustainability and ensuring that grassroots level activities, activation or activism is conducted more.
I'd like to say this, I'm not going to detract anything from the great service done by the first responders, which is the community and of course the tri-forces. But I do believe that, how much more disasters can we cope with. Now 69% of Badulla district is supposed to be landslide prone. Now if all this starts going, can we as a nation manage? I don't think we can. Can we manage to relocate all these people once the disaster happens? It is much better to try and see if we can do some mitigation, to do preventive action. It is like a disease. You do preventive medicine and spend less on the curative.
Kusum, also one of the issues that we face is, like you said, there is no disaster risk reduction or disaster resilience. How do we bring this into our systems? There are training programs conducted at various levels, but children don't know about how to act in the event of a disaster. Adults don't know. I mean, what's going on with our system?
No, I think that we do have programs, but I'm not sure whether we have exactly the kind of programs which is needed, because we talk about disaster risk reduction. The DMC does it. I believe the Ministry of Disaster Management would do it. There are organizations such as the NBRO which are very good technically, but at some point we have to understand why is it that it is not going down to community level. Now for instance at Miriabad, why didn't the evacuation happen fast enough? There are lots of, I'm not going to dwell on that because there are lots of programs being conducted, papers being written on it. But I think that as climate change comes and imposes these disasters, landslides and floods on communities, we have to engage in it in a much more serious way. We have to understand that I have to understand that I may be flooded out one day. I need to be prepared. In the same way, I think the best thing is to work with children. Now, the Sri Lanka Water Partnership has a program called the Water Messengers. On the 8th of April, I was in Aranayaka. I was in Dippitiya, 4 miles away from where this happened. And we gave presents, I think, to 10 children who were prize winners in our SS competition. And I think that what they wrote, I believe it is on our website, the YouTube. If I can sort of read what this child wrote, he says, she's talking about Maui. Maui is not only a blessing for people like us living in the Aranayaka area. It provides life-giving water to thousands of people till it reaches the sea at Kochikada. But the way our elders are abusing this beautiful waterway, children like us will never be able to enjoy the benefit for very long. Is there no law in this country to prevent this relentless pollution? So children see this, but they are helpless. So I think one is we need to engage with them, because what we have done wrong is going to be visited on them tenfold. But they are also, like in this case that I mentioned of the old women being asked to come for a DMC training, they are the people that we should be training. We need to talk with people who will be effective, give ideas to the community, who can say, look, we have had so much of rain. I think we have to now start evacuating ourselves.
There are plans underway to make this whole area a megapolis, the Western Province. How do you think these mega development projects, what is the effect it will have on natural disasters, on fastening it?
I think that programs like the megapolis has to go from a very wide-angled lens. A megapolis cannot function only on what is in the western province. Where does the water come from? That is one thing that one has to ensure. Water security for the megapolis. This is again going back to my theme of looking after your catchments. It's for your own good. It's for your own health. The second is that if, as we have seen, and I think your Sirasa has constantly covered this, the filling in of wetlands in the western province, which again seems to go on uncontrolled, unchecked, unexacerbated. But there are so many laws in Sri Lanka. But these are not being operationalized. We know that we have seen paddy fields, they start building, filling in at Friday evening. By Sunday, the foundation is put. So naturally, you know, this kind of situation cannot go on much longer.
But if we contrast this situation in Sri Lanka with other countries, for example in Japan, just before the show you were mentioning this particular example, there are development projects. However, they don't suffer from such situations like floods unannounced.
Well, they do have floods, they have, I mean, they had tsunamis as well, in spite of all their disaster preparedness. So I believe that, you know, there's so much that we can do. But I was quite surprised to go into urban settings and find a paddy field in the middle of a town. And I said, you know, why do you do this? Obviously, it can't be for economic reasons. It was simply to use as a sponge for drainage water. So if you take Colombo, if you take the Portuguese, the Dutch map of Colombo, Colombo is a wetland. Quite a lot. So, but we are feeling it, we are building up. We have to understand this conflict between environment and development. There has to be a give and take. There can't be a situation where we will fill in everything and expect not to have repercussions. There has to be we have to understand that we can change the land use pattern in Aranayaka, but we have to accept the consequences.
Kusum, you mentioned that a great deal of Badulla is now facing the threat of landslides. How do you propose, as an activist, as someone who has been involved in this kind of work for decades, how do you propose we go about resolving this issue?
See, I think I would like to go more as a concerned citizen, and I think there are more concerned citizens in Badulla. How do they recognize their problem? It is really important that we give information to communities, because if I can sort of tell you these three words which are buzzing in my head, it is strengthen, it is create, and it is innovate. We need to strengthen communities, because we have to understand that the government itself cannot do anything very much in a disaster. The first responders are communities, and they are our watchdogs. They are the ones who should be able to say, I see a spring coming out, I see a crack, there is a threat. They should be, and especially the young people should be trained to identify these threats. I think identification and prior knowledge is part of the solution. So strengthening communities, strengthening their awareness, strengthening the linkages between agencies, because very often agencies go on a silo mentality. You know, you work within your area of work, but there is no how shall I say, sharing of information. I know that till about last year we had a very nice panel, well actually it was a group of experts meeting in this NDMC. We used to meet every month, and there was sharing of information. Now that kind of initiative has to be continued, because there we would go and we would listen to maybe the Navy Rapid Response Group, we would listen to another community, maybe something like an INGO talking about wells in Ampara. So that collective learning was very important. I think this collective learning is the road to collective solutions.
All right. Also, now we spoke about Aranayaka, we spoke about Miria Badda, the Maui Initiative. Can you discuss that a bit? What is the work that you do with regard to Maui? And let's see if we can take some lessons from there in order to implement them across Sri Lanka.
Now for Maui, the Maui Area Water Partnership we set up. It's a collection of agencies and community. We have something there called the Maui Mituro. We have an organization in Aranayaka called the Maui Kudawe Surakime Sangvidane. And in fact, they are the ones who have been that we have been liaising with in this crisis. Now, one is they keep on asking us to help them in curbing illicit sand mining, which is a disaster for any river. Many of our rivers are, I think, being devastated by that. The second is that they have this issue of water quality. Maui is known for rather, I would say, notorious for viral hepatitis. So with support from the private sector, we undertook about 2 years ago an interesting survey. We found a very simple thing of cross-contamination. The same bucket is being used for the well and the toilet. Now this is a very simple thing. It's very easy to change that behavior pattern. But it was not identified. But we have also done rainwater harvesting systems for schools and hospitals in the Maui catchment. We have also done conservation of river banks. You know, planting economically useful trees like areca nut, then important trees like kumbuk, so that the community can look after its own river. The community looking after the river in Maui is so important for us downstream. That is our water tower. That is what we should be looking at, because we have to remember we are talking now about rain and floods, but the droughts will come. We had a drought, we had a heat. We had the kind of heat that none of us were expected to ever experience in our lifetime. And the droughts will come more and more, and they may be longer. We had a 3-month drought. What if we have a 5-month drought? We have to look after every spring, every river, every catchment. It's more than gold.
Kusum, I'd also like to talk about attitudinal change and the need for it. When there is a natural disaster, something that we tend to do is to immediately react, to respond, and then after a few months we've forgotten about it and moved on. This attitudinal shift, or does it need a paradigm shift in your opinion? How should we go about ensuring that we respond to disasters and then learn a lesson from it, and then try to ensure that we avert or minimize the effects of the next disaster if there is one? How do you see this?
I think that if I look at my first big disaster, it was the tsunami. And then within 2 hours, I found myself in a camp with 5,000 people. Not that I was, looking after 5,000 people, who just came flooding in. We learned a lot from that. But we were overwhelmed by the generosity of the Sri Lankan public. I think the Sri Lankan people are wonderful. Whatever problems they may have among themselves, when a disaster comes, they stop everything, drop everything, and rush. But then that sort of gush of generosity, can we channel it in a different way? Now I know that your organization, as well as many other media organizations and private sector, are very good after the event. Can we channel this energy so that you will undertake to maybe look after one catchment? Now I know about Ambalakanda in Aranayaka is also having a threat. I heard that about 4 or 5 acres of newly planted tea in Rahala has already slipped. Now can we go before the event? Can we channel this? It's not fantastically, how shall I say, attractive. There is a certain, heart catching moment where you are going and seeing this disaster affected person and giving over something. It's like the preventive medicine and the curative medicine that I talked about. Can you prevent a disaster? If you can, as an organization, if somebody as an organization can say, This area was landslide prone, but for 5 years we have worked on it. We have done better land planning. We have given awareness to women and children. It is very important that women understand the issues. I believe this is exactly the role that the government agencies need to initiate. I mean, they've been put in place for exactly this reason, to avert disasters, to create awareness among communities, among the public. But is this really being done then? What I feel is that when we talk about water, we say water is everybody's business. Now, I think we need to say that disasters is everybody's business. Government agencies cannot work by themselves. They have to link up with civil society. They have to link up with other government agencies. Now, if you take the 23 government officers who are already in one Grama Nilidhari office, quite apart from that, you might get a project on, tea cultivation, you would get another project on maybe water conservation, but there has to be some kind of joint planning and joint solutions. The solutions are never found within one agency or one group. The solutions have to come laterally across the board.
Okay, so basically you're talking about a multi-stakeholder dialogue on a national level.
I think that I would like to expand that a little bit and say a multi-stakeholder dialogue, not only at national level, but in the small microcosm of a Aranayaka Grama Nilidhari Vasama or a divisional secretariat. I know divisional secretariats have these planning meetings, they have disaster panels, but there must be something that we can do more, because we simply cannot keep on taking this kind of disaster over and over again. How many houses are we going to build? How many people are we going to have who are displaced? At some point, these displaced people, if they decide to leave totally, they become, what do we call them? Climate refugees? Disaster refugees? No, we need to work out there in maintaining environment, in reducing the conflicts between environment and development as much as possible.
Let's talk a bit about education, about disaster, about climate change. This really hasn't been incorporated into our local syllabuses. Children are not aware about the life-changing impacts of climate change, of natural disasters. How do you foresee this? How do you look at this? As in, do you think that the syllabuses need to be changed? Do you think this needs to be mandatorily included into our curriculum?
Well, I think from the organizations that I work with, the Sri Lanka Water Partnership and Netwater, and then other agencies as well, I think that if I can show you something, Sonali, this is the first book that we did in Sinhala about the tsunami, and this was supported by the Japan Water Forum. This went into quite a few communities on the coastal level.
Right.
Along with that, we did this one, which is preparing communities, the school community. We had a project book, we had an activity book, we had charts telling them, very small, simple activities which can be undertaken by a community, by a school community, by a classroom.
Right.
Now, I think this awareness has to go first to schools, as you said, through their syllabus. But then you don't have to wait for a syllabus change. In fact, you cannot afford to wait for a syllabus change. Every organization which is working in these communities can start the thinking process, because I think my first word we have talked about quite a bit, which is strengthen. The second one is create. You need to create awareness. You need to create understanding. You have to create a knowledge base. You have to be empowered by knowledge so that you can support your community before the disaster happens.
How difficult does this become given the extent of illegal constructions taking place across the country?
You can add the illicit logging to that. illegal constructions happens mostly in wetlands, but it is also happening in some other mountain areas, which were earlier, especially under the British, there was a rule that you should not build within a certain height. Now this rule, I don't know when it vanished, but it seems to have vanished. Now even in Aranayaka, there was construction and not small houses. There were 2-story houses being built up there, in this area which slipped. Second one is illicit logging. Now we are in Environment Month. This is the month that everybody goes out and starts planting trees, the president downwards. But how much do we put into preserving the tree cover which is already there? Because whenever you read a newspaper, you would say 30 acres are being deforested in Badulla, another in Ampara. We are talking about our precious tree cover vanishing. And who looks after that? Who is responsible for that? Now again, I'd like to tell you the Sri Lanka Water Partnership did a very innovative program on river sand mining, where we trained the STF. Because we felt that the STF should not go only, looking after the valley lorry, the sand lorries. Right. And after our training, they started going after the heavy machinery. So I believe that, the Triforces and the police are very important players in even protecting our environment. If we can give that guidance and ask them, look at the illicit sand mining, look at not so much the sand mining upstream, but the logging.
In fact, our incumbent President Maithripala Sirisena has taken the Ministry of Environment to his purview, under his purview. So this itself is a great sort of sign to ensure that we preserve the environment, we ensure that environmental pollution is at a minimum. Also, Kusum, something I need to ask you is this need for research and analysis. At the level of preparedness, we are at a very low level. So is the government mechanism ready to handle this kind of situation? And also the follow-up.
Well, talking about our perspective from, for instance, and my personal perspective is that we need to have integrated water resource management, for which we have different players. We have the government, we have civil society, we have the universities and academia. They are very important, and the private sector. Right. In some of these activities that we have undertaken, all four have come together. In this Aranayaka study that I talked about, it was funded by the private sector, carried out by a university, with partnership from civil society and all the line agencies on the ground. So I believe that this, as you know, working together is not always very difficult. Sometimes it is quite easy, sometimes it's difficult depending on the personalities. But if we come from this one stance that what we are doing is simply trying to minimize the tragedies which have now come one upon the other on Sri Lanka. One after the other we are facing this. How much more can we stand? How much more can we do? How much more can the community respond? Because one day we are rushing with relief packets in one direction, another day in another direction.
Sri Lanka has committed to a low carbon future. It's a signatory to the Paris Climate Agreement. Do you think Sri Lankans are really aware of what climate change is?
I think that though we have started talking about climate change, though the media has been also referring to it, and that's very effective, it is still not ingrained in our mindset. And that is where again my word create comes in. We have to create that awareness. We have to create a situation where we are talking about children who have lost their birth certificates, etc. We say in this book, you should have a disaster evacuation pack, where you have your material, your most valuable documents ready for evacuation.
My final question to you. Do you believe we have the capacity to change attitudes and move towards a better, more environment-savvy Sri Lanka?
I think that Sri Lankans take to innovation quite well. I mean, look at us. We had the way that we have changed in our use of smartphones, for instance. Now we have tools, but we may be wanting to use them a little more effectively in disaster risk reduction. I believe that Sri Lankans, if given the right information, if given that the right awareness, can move towards making themselves, this country, much more prepared and at a higher level of disaster risk resilience.
Thank you very much. That was, of course, Kusum Athukorala, a water activist and the co-chair of a UNESCO Gender Panel for World Water Development Report. With that, we wrap up this edition of Newsline. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.